Thank you, Anatoly Ivanovich, for warm words. You don't hear them too often in everyday life. Esteemed gentlemen, in the military doctrine of Russian Federation, which was approved by the President of Russian Federation in 2014, we have an updated list of threats to the state. And for the first time, we identified the ever-growing of global terrorism. The legislative use of Russian armed forces in the fight with terrorism is based on the experience which we received in the 90s of last century and in the beginning of this century in the run of counter-terrorist operation in the Northern Caucasus. And today, nobody has a doubt that at that time Russia confronted not just with the groups of ideological separatists, but with a very well organized and very well paid terrorist attack paid from abroad on our country. The armed forces dedicated to the fight with external aggression were supposed to conduct combat operations with the insurgents on its own territory, and we have confronted very tough information pressure, and this ideological war was unleashed by a number of states. That first attack of terrorism was beaten, and we made certain conclusions. In fighting with terrorist formations, the armed forces should be prepared well in advance. Secondly, terrorism should be destroyed at early stage of formation of this threat, and not to give the possibility for their ideology to get into the minds of people. Thirdly, the terrorism could not be eliminated without the use of military force, but the military force is not enough. We have to combine ideological, political, information, and financial resources of the state to successfully fight with the terrorist organizations. This experience received by the Russian armed forces contributed to the formation of the normative and regulatory base to use armed forces both in Russian Federation and to destroy their activity beyond the territories of the national territory. And speaking about the reasons of emergence of the international terrorism, we can single out the following. The conditions for its development is definitely created by a very miserable position of the population of a number of states and the lack of future and the prospects for further development, which is destroyed also by radical ideology like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other terrorist formations. Another reason for the growth of terrorist threat is the intervention from the outsides into the matters of sovereign states, trying to impose the values of Western democracy in the countries with their own mentality, spiritual values, and traditions. Artificial imposure of strange ideals exploded Northern Africa and Middle East. The consequences of the so-called Arab Spring laid down as a heavy burden on the shoulders of Europeans. In Libya, where there was Gaddafi's ouster, and it simply discontinued its existence as a sovereign state and became a basis for the growth of ISIS and other terrorist formations. Occupation of Iraq, elimination of another leader, and so-called democratization of the country under the barrels of machine guns, the most part of the armed forces and the political elite, they have formed the core of ISIS and established its power on a considerable territory of its country. The third reason for terrorist threat is the attempt of a number of countries to use the services of terrorist and extremist organizations to achieve their political goals and to destroy perhaps not democratic but stable statehood formations. And the terrorist formations, they start growing. They occupied extensive territories and start forming the economic base, shape quasi-state structures which destabilize whole regions and create threat to their civilized humanity. The events in Syria were the process of destabilization of the state and ousting of legal government went on through the tested methodology is a good example. At first, they initiate the protests with the support from the outsides, then followed by the armed attacks on the representatives of the state power and law enforcement bodies, then the mass attack of terrorist formations supported by foreign structures and states. In the middle of 2015, in Syria, we found a critical situation. It was a very acute issue of preserving it as a sovereign state. The change of power in the republic meant the disintegration of the country on ethnic and confessional principle and cessation of existence of a unified state. The development in Syria, as per the Libyan scenario, would turn a prosperous country into the country disseminating terrorist threats through the whole of Middle East area. From the area of Middle East, we saw the formation of forces which threatens the national security of Russia. We have an information that in 2015 we had about 4.5 thousand Russian citizens and CIS countries fighting in ISIS formations. And it wasn't difficult to forecast what would be in case Assad's regime and disintegration of Syria would happen. So under this situation, the president of Russian Federation took the decision about the use of the armed forces of Russia in this counter-terrorist operations, which was supported by the parliament. And we are not talking about, we are talking about our military force to fight terrorism, and it doesn't mean the interference in the matters of states or support of some of the movements. We are absolutely legally present in Syria under the request of Syrian government, which we cannot say about the international coalition, which infringes the laws of international rule. Since the 30th of September of 2015, the aerospace forces inflicts airstrikes on terrorists on the territory of Syria. We choose targets on the basis of all types of reconnaissance, which is confirmed by drones, and only after careful selection we engage targets. And we do not inflict strikes on schools, mosques, and hospitals. However, we know that terrorists, they have their headquarters in these locations. As part of the fight against those detachments, the armed forces of Russia, along with the airstrikes, are solving other missions. The Russian military advisors, they provide assistance to the command of the Syrian army in planning the combat operations, also prepare the combat operations of different army units. When preparing the operations of the aerospace forces, we especially devoted a lot of attention to prevent air incidents in the airspace of Syria. Despite the cooperation between Russia and United States was frozen in terms of military cooperations, but mutual interest made it possible to shortly prepare and sign bilateral memorandum to prevent air incidents in the skies of Syria. Further on, to observe these coordinated rules, all other participants joined the coalition led by the United States. In Baghdad, we have information center where Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Russia are participating. A very effective mechanism is working between defense ministers between Russia and Israel as part of the joint group to prevent incidents at the Syrian directions. After withdrawal of part of forces from aerospace forces, our priorities changed. Today, the key role of the armed forces in Syria is to contribute the appeasing process and to launch of the political process. The joint Russian declaration dated 27th of February, the Russian armed forces have additional responsibility on humanitarian operations, demining of liberated areas and territories. At Khmeimim airfield, we have a center for peace efforts, and this is the same center as Americans have in Amman and the target group in Geneva, and we work in line with the achieved agreements. The activity of the center is concentrated on efforts to ensure ceasefire and ensure dialogue between state structures and their constructive opposition. At the same time, one of the destabilizing factors affecting the existence is the continuation of the supply by Ankara, the terrorist groups with weapons, ammunition, and pharmaceuticals. Terrorists who were wounded in the battle activities, they are being cured in Turkish hospitals. This center now is spending a lot of effort to ensure peace between the fighting sides and to ensure the humanitarian aid to the population. In the end of my presentation, I would like to mark out that in our action in Syria, we proceed from the fact that the destiny of Syria and its political structure, who will be the leader of Syria, would be chosen by Syrians themselves. And Syria, with the joint efforts, could be preserved as a legitimate and unified state, which it was before 2011. Thank you for your attention.